If I were to ask you what are your values, you'll be stumped. You won't be able to tell you. Like, is honesty a value? Is being faithful a value? Hardworking, tenacity, or rubbish. At the end of the day, value is based on your values are the stories you cherish. It's about if you can instantiate a story for me, if you can tell me something which is intriguing about you, let me derive your values out of it. If you had to say a value, it's not a value, it's a brag, it's a flex, it's a con, if you will. Okay. So let's talk about brainstorming for essays. What does it involve? What are the values? How do we show, not tell? And how do we on ramp from values to the UC PIQ essays all the way to personal essay. And this is something which you should think in general when you're writing personal essays. Do not start with just writing a personal essay. Start with something more manageable. Okay. So the essays are really the one place you have a chance to dream. You have a chance to make a difference or to showcase, flex your side of your personality, which schools are not seeing otherwise. Your recommendations are still going to talk about statement of fact. Your transcripts are going to say what you did in the past, but this is your chance to dream big, to really show your vision where you're going. So sometimes you might not have a vision, you haven't really thought it through, but this is the chance, this is your time to actually think about it and actually make it happen. Okay. Like, convince the schools that you have a vision, build a vision with me, and convince the school that you have it, and then convince yourself about it. So like I said, personal value that you have, let's first figure out what your personal values are. Now I've called out like 6 to 12 values over here, and you can pause the video to see what these values are, what they trigger in you, like bravery, curiosity. The goal is for you to look at these activities and to actually think about something, it's an idea or a story that comes to your mind. And if a story comes to your mind, think of it in what's called as the star format. The situation, what was the situation, set it up for me, what was the task at hand, what actions you took. So task at hand meaning what was important, like why it was important to be done, what was the cost of failure, what was the actions you took or what you inspired, and what are the results. Let me be the judge to say which one of the values does that triangulate to. Okay, so that's kind of what we're trying to put together here for you in terms of values. So you have these values here. Here's another set of values, personal values too, around kindness, love, perseverance, teamwork. So pick up a few values and, like I said, come up with 7 to 8 stories of your life based on these 24 different values I've called out. And let's talk about it. Let's talk in the star format. Let's try to understand you as a person. And once I know who you are from your informal stories, then we can start formalizing those stories. Okay. There are 5 traits that schools look for in you as a person. They are looking for you if you could contribute to society, so a community. So look at the questions, look at the specific, the colored items here on this page, intellectual curiosity, initiative, and see the questions. I mean, there are many more questions out like this kind. I have the canned answers available from my side, some sample answers my students have written. Maybe those can trigger some thoughts. But use these 5 areas: that curiosity, contribution, initiative, diversity, and drive, to get your mindset about who you are. Let's try to understand who you are, then we'll apply it to some other things. Okay. But once you have this figured out, like 7 to 10 dossiers or stories of your life in the star format, and something about what you learned from them, we'll talk about that as well. Okay. Then you apply it to the UC application, so University of California. You apply it to your leadership, or you apply to what you learned, in the prior page over here around drive, initiative, contribution. You map it to the UCs, to what happens in the UC different prompts. Apply it here. See how you perform with this. To see how the stories you came up with apply to these prompts. So you're not reverse engineering a prompt to come up with a story. You have a story, you're applying it to a prompt. Okay, that's how you want to go naturally as a person. And then we apply what you learned over there to a personal essay. A personal essay is different from UC's. It's a lot more informal. It's a lot more vulnerable. It's a lot more nuanced and rant oriented. So look at this again, freeze the video to see what a personal essay is, but fundamentally it's very different from a UC, but it's also the building block. You need to go through your values, then to your UCs, and then you get to the personal essay. You know, the interesting thing about the personal essay is that it's a rant. It's a rant that just flows out of you. When you've written about 7 to 8 stories of your life showing aspects of you, when you've finalized or formalized some of them into the UC PIQs, it just starts flowing. I mean, and I can work with you on that, but mostly my students will just start. It's more like an obvious statement that comes out saying, I get it, right? Because the rant is something which connects one small aspect of their life, or maybe one big aspect, but a small incident. It's not typically a hero's journey. It's not something which is going on and on and on. A personal essay will typically take an incident in life, maybe over a few days or a few weeks or maybe a few months, but it has a fairly finite beginning and an end. And through the journey that you explain in the personal essay, you are now showing aspects of your personality which, like you're talking about some intellectual curiosity, you're showing some values around vulnerability, around resourcefulness, or hunger to succeed, or just aspects of what you aspire the world to become. Those things show up in the personal essay. So don't force the personal essay on you. Let it build on you over a few stories, over a few values, over a few essays. Definitely don't make that the first thing you start to work on. Now, the conclusion of it is something which makes the reader wonder, where are you going to go next? Don't leave it like close it all the way. Don't try to make a hook in the beginning like, oh my God, it has to like fill a certain way. It could start from the center, what we call as the Medea race. You could start from the center, you could go in the back and then come back in the front, but don't do too much of that up, backward, forward. It's a story, right? You're trying to explain something. It's like I joke with a lot of people, a lot of my students saying, if you're meeting somebody for a date and you'll end up seeing something in that moment and you make a comment, that comment will last like 2-3 minutes when you're making a point, but it can have a lasting impact on the other persons to a point where they want to meet you again. So that's really the nature of the personal essay. You are communicating that point of view in a tone which is very personal. It's something which you wouldn't talk otherwise in the public, but to somebody personally you could talk about it. There are ways to make this personal essay, in fact, become the UC essay, and you have a way to make the UC essay convert into a PIQ. Okay, so there are multiple ways to play it. Just think of it, what works for you, and go from there. Now, the personal statement again is a melting pot. It's a melting pot of your style, some technicalities, something about maybe your work. It's really plan of the future. So if you freeze this video and you look at the details, like the jobs you've done, you kind of start building it from a brainstorming perspective where you have some evidential data about skills. There are attributes that you can talk about that make you special, things you're proud of, things you're maybe not as proud of, but it all somehow starts coming together. I mean, I've also put in some stuff here for an international student. So think of it in those language. Nothing is out of bounds, yet your point is to communicate a theme, connect things. Like I've had students connect multiple stories through a theme, and that's okay to say as long as there's a theme to it and you can have a beginning and an end to it. You could consider that as well. The other way to build a personal essay is to take your connections which come across your dossiers, the experience dossiers. You might start seeing a lineage of diversity or a drive or of intellectual curiosity that's going across multiple essays, and you could use that to connect the dots. You could talk about maybe your volunteering experience, what you learned while doing that, or you met somebody curious over there, and how that applies to maybe an extracurricular that you picked up along the way. Maybe a relevant experience around some kind of a part time job you did or a summer placement. But it's all somewhere around connecting your passion, your volunteer experience, your relevance, of shadowing maybe you've done on certain roles to people, but try to connect it with a theme. And the way to do it is like you can do this kind of mind mapping as well, where you write a lot of your experiences, as throw them as boxes on a mind map, connect them to each other through some value to each other. That's another way you could make this work for you. Sometimes this brainstorming process can be what we call as it's a personal narrative, a small moment. Think of it like, it's a small story that you want to talk about in big ideas. What you did for the UCs and for the dossiers experiences is really the watermelon ideas, like the big ideas of life. And then you are taking those big ideas, finding some small nuance of it, which is connecting some of those big ideas, and then going with it. So an example of the watermelon idea is, as he's explaining in this example over here, is my vacation to Disney World. But the time you rode the Space Mountain, which is one small time within that vacation, how vulnerable you were, how you felt elated at the end of it, or how you felt changed as a person as a result of that whole thing could be another one. Playing soccer could be the watermelon idea, versus what's important is the time that you kicked the winning goal, what was going through your mind. And you could go into a Medea race where you can start from the center, talk about the past, how you were, what it made you into. So focus less on the what, focus more on the why, and more on what it made you into. It's like, why are you telling me this story? Is the content by itself intriguing, or what you learned out of it more intriguing? Often adcoms want to know what you learned and how it made you over time versus the what. And a lot of the amateur students focus on the what. These are some of your prompts that were there for 2022. 7 prompts. Out of these 7, the one I really hate is the prompt number 7, which is take an essay of any topic of your choice. It could be something you've written to a different prompt, or design your own. I feel like nothing frustrates a admissions officer more than seeing something completely new, because they're overwhelmed with so much content to look at. If you're giving them something completely new to think, they'll do it for you, but that takes away from the time they have on the entire application. Remember, they have less than 10, 15, 20 minutes to look at the entire application. So you don't want to give them content which could, make them wonder or think more. So try to reduce their thinking. Okay. I like number 1, which is fairly important, talking about the backgrounds people have, meaningful. I also like number 4 a lot, which is a new prompt. Reflect on something someone has done for you that's made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. Focus on, again, the last part of it. How has this gratitude affected or motivated you? Like, you could take a very small story of somebody's life, how it has impacted you, but how it has impacted you could be a much bigger answer. Same thing in number 6. Describe a topic, idea, concept so engaging it makes you lose track of all time. Why does it captivate you? Or what or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? Think of it like the last part of the question is, most people will ignore that part. But that's really the one they really want to know. What or who would you turn to when you want to learn more? So make sure you do attempt that part of the question. That's a very critical part. Okay? Then comes the supplemental essay. So we've talked about PIQs, we've talked about the dossier, we've talked about the personal essay, and then come these supplemental essays. These are the ones that are provided to schools as a part of your application, which is school specific, which is why you want to go to Stanford, or the extracurricular essay about, tell me about an extracurricular you have to do. So make sure some of these are experiences you talk about in your, like there's an ambitions dossier where you can talk about your ambitions, what you want to do. That needs to be very specific, and that can be fairly detailed about, it can become about the major or field of study that you want to study. sometimes these questions are extracurricular. Tell me about an extracurricular essay activity, or how have you impacted the community. And literally, you can pick up verbatim from the UCs, and you could answer the same ones over here. But what becomes more unique is like major of study, which you could pick up in theory from one of the UCs. Create your own class is something which, again, from intellectual curiosity, you could build on it. The beauty of a lot of these answers is you don't have to overthink them. If you did a good job with your dossier initially with putting your experiences, a lot of this becomes fairly easy to put together. So that's my thought process, is like spend enough time on the experiences document early on, so you can only pick up and just keep building on it. In fact, a lot of my students, after the first 2 or 3 applications, they are just reusing. Like 90% of the work we're doing is our focus is how can I reuse what I already created for this? And then we'll end up with something called virgin essays, with like a few essays which are completely out of the whack. And that's fine, but you want to make sure 80%, 90% of your work is repeat work which you can use. I feel like this is a topic I could talk forever on, which is mistakes you make in essay writing. I think a large reason people make mistakes is because you overthink the process. You think that essays are going to get you into college, whereas essays are really just a veneer on top of your personality, which is already there. So you don't have to earth-shatteringly think about something saying, oh my God, if I come up with this crazy ass thing, it's going to get me in. So in this session, I will talk about mistakes students make, my own students have made, I have made in the past. I'll talk about things I've seen working well. We'll also go into the Costco essay, which is a very known, famed essay. See what that one goes. Talk about some model essays, some Stanford essay opening lines, which will kind of give you an idea of what to think. But what I want you to take away is just try to be like water, try to be flowing. Don't try to overthink the whole plan, and things just work out okay. So 5 myths that we've called out here, which is most of my students get into analysis paralysis. They want to write something completely unique. They don't believe in a story about a bullying or about a injury or coming back from some problem or a broken home. They feel like those things don't matter. They want to come up with something completely unique. And what happens in that process is they overthink the whole thing, and whatever they come up with lacks, sometimes has a chance of being completely wacky. You don't want to be out of the norm. You want to be within the norm. Remember, essays don't get you in. Essays just show a more humane side of you. What gets you in is academics, okay? And demonstrated interest, and that's what schools really care about. This just tells them how you would fit in a classroom, how would you collaborate. They get to see a little bit about your personality. That's really all what this is. So do not overthink this process, okay? Now, thinking that there is a right answer for every question, there is not. I mean, you don't try to overthink the UCs or saying, if this is what they wrote, this is what they meant. There are multiple ways you can answer the same question, and you'll be right all the times, okay? You really don't have to be funny. I mean, you can be a little bit funny, humorous somewhere, but don't start putting smileys in there or try to make it sound really funny where like, okay, this is an application, this is a formal process. So think of it, okay? That you'll write the best application in the first time itself. I have students who come and say, I can write it, I just need to get the idea, and if I'll sit for 10 hours, I'll get it done. It doesn't work like that. You have to make incremental progress day over day, make changes, throw some ideas. Sometimes it even helps, don't write down anything, just jot down a few points and talk to your counselor if the things are flowing, okay? Or just talk it out. Maybe do a recording of you speaking your essay or your point of view and send it to your counselor. I've seen students come to me with that kind of content, and I can respond back saying, this doesn't sound good, or it does sound good, or maybe take it in this direction, okay? The other one I see that people think of it is, they think people in admissions are really like different. But they're not. They're like usually the ones who are reading your applications, at least the first 1 or 2 rounds, are usually very young readers. They're usually in the 20s and 30s. So don't think that you need to write something very stereotypical to appeal to a audience or not to an audience. Okay, don't try too hard to make a point. Like, don't try to be saying, oh my god, if I write something so cool, they'll forget, they will remember me for the rest of their life. You're not looking for that stuff. That's too much of a stress you're taking, and it sounds borderline not true. Okay, try to write something which people can associate, they can relate with. Maybe it's a story, like the Costco essay is a story about somebody who's going through Costco, okay, and how he remembers his own life through those perspectives. Make it too predictable, don't do that, or make it too generic. The ones I hate most are the ones where there are cliches, where they have not really thought it through all the way, and the student has just written like literally lecturing adcom, or a rant about life. All that bullshit doesn't work. I mean, you have to give stories. Every line you write has to be some story about some value, which it either gives you a new value or it emphasizes a value that you've already thought about from your experiences document. So really think of it, it connects back to your experiences. Okay. Sometimes they'll want to write completely on their own, students. They won't get their counselors or teachers, parents involved in the process, which is actually a big mistake, because most of these people know something about you which maybe even you don't know about yourself. Okay, so remember that and try to leverage that good that these people can provide to you. Forget, what I notice is, they want to write about something that's already known. Maybe if activities you've already mentioned that you got a or you got you came back with something, or you did an award. What's the point of saying that? I mean, tell me something in my essay which I can't glean from your activities list, or I can't get from your transcripts, or maybe from your recommendations. So really think of what is it that they might not know about me that they should know about me, which my transcripts and other pieces of information will not give to them. This is what you should be doing. Some of the best practices. Be creative. As I say, funny, but not too funny. Omit anything that doesn't advance the story. That's a very fine comb, like every one of the things you write. Like, you omit what you don't think is going to take it first, but any further. Write it in first person. Do not write in, something like you say the I. Explain your side of the story, okay? Focus more on the why. Just not important what happened. Why or what did you do with it is far more important and useful. Do not trust your friends or the cousin, the first year engineering college friend of yours thinking they're smart asses. Okay, you have to be on your own, and you have to know what you want to communicate, and have 1 or 2 people, like a parent or an English teacher and your counselor, and maybe one more person. But that's it. Do not show your essay to 15 people, because you'll get 18 opinions and you'll go crazy, and you'll drive your counselor crazy along with that. Okay. Less is always better. You don't have to hit the word count. If it's a 350 word essay or 250 word, you don't have to go to 249. It's okay to be at a 75th percent margin. If you can get enough content across, or you communicate your point across in 200 words for a 250 word essay, that goes in your favor. It's not taken against you. Now, if there is more you want to communicate that is connecting to the point and not diminishing your brand, do it. Okay. Then let's talk now about the essay strategies and topics you definitely should avoid. Okay, your personal essay or essay is not a place where you put your resume. You don't just flex saying I did this or I'm good at this. Okay, it's a time for you to think about, reflect. You're not saying what they can already read in your activities or in your, like, I got an A, and that's one other one we call out. Well, they can see you were having a C in last year's grade, and now you got an A. Now, if there's a really important story behind it which will communicate a point, that's great. But don't say that I got a C, I worked my tail off, got an A. Okay. Stay away from religion, politics. You never want to talk about those things. This just does not take you anywhere. You just don't know who's reading your essay. Generic topics is again a no-no. Never talk in generics. Never talk cliches. Don't try to lecture the professors or the adcom. Come to specifics. Be specific oriented. Very, very, very important. Last but not the least is it's called the mission trip essay, which is I made one trip to some place in Timbuktu and I realized homelessness is a big problem and I changed my life. Bullshit, right? I mean, something which you can show longevity is very important to make some points like this. So make sure you do that. These are some blunders people have made in the past, like, making it sound like I am amazing. Look at me, I'm just killing it. The tennis championship, there was the last point. Like, too many people write all this sports injury and sports match and how it was changing my mind. They're bored, right? ASB and the winner is actually this one. My own daughter recently wrote this one. The touchdown pass in slow motion. Too much about travel monologues, that I traveled over here and I suddenly had a realization. Sounds elitist, okay? Be very careful. I'm not unique, which makes me unique, so pity me, kind of thing. Everybody has some unique side to themselves, and find it. It comes. It doesn't have to be earth-shatteringly unique, but find it. You'll find it, okay? Things which again colleges hate to see, which makes them the admissions groan, is they've read so much about travel logs, about you traveled and you had a new vision over there. Traveling, recovering from sports injury, that's a very common one people write about. um, if you mentioned it in your extracurriculars, there's no point of talking as a common app. Talk about Black Lives Matter or something new in the news, saying, "Oh, this is so important. It impacted me so much." Stay away from politics. Not needed. Okay. Long sentences when you can get away with short, to the point, active writing. That's really the point. Think of it like the adcom person reading it probably had a fight with his wife or his husband, her husband or their spouse, and they've not had coffee in the morning and they're looking at your application. Okay, think of that use case, and so try to spare them from the agony of reading something too much, because